Good morning. We are back to the book Liberation. Today we are going to start chapter 5. Last month, when we discussed chapter 4, which is called A Strange City, we follow as Andre Luiz, Gubbio, and Eloy get into the place where Gregorio, the former Pope, leads and governs. They have a brief encounter with him by the end of the chapter. Andre Luiz was very impressed by the spirits they saw around, all deformed spirits, very spirits that are really in a very difficult situation, let's say. Of course, for their own reasons, each one of them. So by the end of the chapter, they are sent to a resting place. Of course, they are disguised to be not to look like what they really are. It's important that they don't call the attention of Gregorio and his people, but you know, the general impression was very heavy, very dark, and now they are going to see on this chapter, which is called Selective Procedure, what is done there with all the spirits that arrive at this place. Okay, Philip, do the honors for us.
Certainly. A selective procedure. That night, after several hours of meditating and praying in a dark room without anyone saying a word, we were taken to a large, curious-looking building. The strange palace was shaped like a huge hexagon with brownish spires rising into the air. There were several rooms dedicated to odd services. Illuminated both inside and out by large torches, the place had the unpleasant aspect of a building on fire. In the custody of 4 of Gregorio's guards, who told us that we would have to be examined before having any direct contact with the priests, we entered a large hall containing a few dozen deplorable-looking entities. Old and young, men and women were wandering around in relative silence. Some were moaning and weeping. I could see that nearly all of them were sickly. Several were obviously mentally ill. Impressed, I studied their sickly aspect. Their perispirits were as opaque as a physical body. The stigmas of old age, disease, and disenchantment, which dog the human experience, were completely victorious. Fear controlled the most desperate because the silence was stifling. Although anxiety was plainly visible on every face. A few servants wearing characteristic garb were separating the discarnates into several groups as they entered in order to be selected and, oh, I can't see the top line.
Tried.
The instructor explained discreetly. The merciless judges who live here perform this ceremony every week. The selection process is based on the radiations emitted by each subject. Certain colors characterize the auroras of ignorant, perverse, and imbalanced spirits, and the guards in charge of doing the selecting are technicians that identify various ills indicated by such colors. This selection process makes the judges' work easier and thus more thorough.
Okay, thanks, Philip. So after they spend the night in prayer in this dark room, They were taken by 4 of Gregorio's guards to a place where they would be examined before they could enter into contact with Gregorio, the priest, the leader, right? If you remember last month when we talked about the place, the description they made of the place when they arrived at the palace, it all looked very. It was a real city, right? But all very dark and very unpleasant. So they are taken to this place, and there are a lot of spirits there, old and young, men and women were wandering around in relative silence. Now, remember, we talk about discarnation. We go back to the spiritual world. When we wake up in the spiritual world, we are exactly like with the perispirit reflecting exactly the physical body we left behind. And only after a certain time in the spiritual world, when we become more aware of our situation and our reality, our spiritual body, our perispirit, starts to adapt to the surroundings, to our mind, and transforms it. So what they are seeing there are spirits that are really reflecting how they left their physical body behind. That's why you say old and young, and men and women, of course, because you are still what you were before. Some were mourning and weeping. And of course, this is a place where sick spirits end up, mentally and physically sick, but above all, mentally, because you don't go to a place like this if you are physically sick, but your mind is doing well. If you are doing productive work, your life, you lived a life that was, a normal life, or a productive life, or a positive life. You don't end up in a place like this. You have to have a perturbed mind, sick mind, a mind filled with guilty or filled with bad intentions that we were carrying from the life that you lived. So this is very important to understand what type of spirits we are going to find there. And Andre Luiz describes, and I underline here, how the perispirits looked. So they looked as opaque as their physical body, as a physical body, meaning they are still very material in the sense of close to physicality. So the perispirit is very dense. That's why it says it's opaque. So everything that they left the physical body had, so old age, disease, disenchantment, all the ills of our human experience are prevailing here. I don't know if the translation completely victorious is a good translation, but it's prevailing here in their physical appearances. Everything that they carry by the end of their physical lives, in their minds and or in their physical bodies, carry over through the spiritual world. Of course, they are all fear. They don't know what's going on there. And the workers were separating them in several groups. How do they separate them? According to their mental energies. So these servants have the ability, because they are working there, to see what mental emanations these spirits send. And these mental emanations, which is, of course, they are all of low vibration, and these guards also vibrate at the lower level. So they are able to see what type of vibration these spirits send. And according to their the type of vibrations they emit, they separate them in different groups. And then Gubbio explains that the judges that judge them on a weekly basis take into consideration these radiations emitted that are, as he says here, there are different colors by their auras of these imbalanced spirits, and the technicians separate according to the colors. Why do they separate? Because it makes the work easy for the judges to send them to where they are going to be sent. These are all spirits that are going to become, in a sense, slaves of these workers for this group in the processes of, doing persecuting and doing harm to others. And we'll see more of this during the chapter. But that's the idea here. Okay. Questions, comments here?
Yeah, start from the beginning. Good morning, everyone. I find interesting the idea that the place looks like a building in fire. So I wonder if it's by design, if it's the story of the chicken and the egg, if it's this appearance is by design to make the idea of the preconceived idea of hell, or the way around, that naturally places in the lower zone will have that appearance that when reported, we give the idea of the hell, this preconceived idea of hell. So what comes first? If they are wise enough to create this idea of this of hell, or if it's a natural occurring thing. And true, you see the idea is a very eloquent technique that they have of being able to look at that wavelength, or that creates the different colors, so to say, of the vibration of those spirits over there, which shows that they do have a pretty eloquent intellectual ability to do that separation, which is not really old news. Spectrography is doing that to identify chemicals in here on Earth already for many years already, but to have the same kind of technology of being able to qualify individuals through the emanations of the energies through some kind of spectrography is a very eloquent thing, which shows that they are not really all that ignorant in terms of intellectual abilities.
Yeah, no, it's important. Very, very good point, Elmo, because it's important to remember that the intellectual evolution and the moral evolution are two different things. So, of course, the leaders of these places like this are evolved intellectually in terms of the ability to see and to dominate less evolved spirits intellectually, and to impose their will. So I think on your first question, I think the construction of the place is a reflection of the minds of all spirits around, which we know, but prevailing the image of the leaders, right? I would imagine that Gregorio and the other high priests there are those that with their mental ability to construct the surroundings is much stronger than the other spirits around, right? So that's my understanding of the process, in a sense. But you know, like you said, we have the spectrometer here. Of course, here we are copying the spiritual world all the time. So this more evolved intellectually spirits have the ability to use all these resources that they have to access less evolved spirits, right?
Yeah, yeah. In particular, the fire is the fire they created by design to create that fear that they are in hell, because that's the preconceived idea of hell as we know throughout it. Human history, when the idea of hell was created with this imagery of the eternal fire, right?
I'm sure it is, Elmo. You know, we don't have any reference here, but I'm sure it is, right? Because
Yeah.
how do you impress spirits that are this type of spirits? By pretending that they are in hell, right?
Yeah.
And they want to impress on them the with the idea of hell, the impossibility of leaving hell. That's very important also, that they want to, because if the spirits learn that there is a way out, because there is always a way out and depends on each one of them, they are going to eventually find a way out, right? So they want to, we are all progressing. So even all those spirits there, eventually they'll find a way out. But what they want is the leaders there is to postpone as much as possible to prevent them finding a way out, right?
Yeah, I agree. And that's exactly the point I'm trying to get, that everything seems to be made to create this artificial idea of hell, to impress on the inhabitants of the place that they are now, that they belong there, and they have that leader who will take care of them, but they are pretty much stuck there.
Yeah. Anyone else here? Elmo, the part that I underlined there, the perispirit, opaque as a physical body. I don't know if you have any comments there, because I thought that's a very interesting description of how these spirits look like, right?
Yeah, I think it goes directly. I don't think it has anything to add from what you said. It's directly related with their mental vibrations. They vibrate so close to matter that the perispirit is so close to matter.
Okay, anyone else? All right, Philip, let's go.
Gregorio's men gave us some room, but they kept an eye on us from the crowded galleries. Thankfully, the personnel doing the selecting did not split the three of us up, but put us in with the rest of the victims. After listening to Gubbio's explanation, I asked, were all these spirits constrained to come here just like us? Are there really satanic spirits like the ones in religious paintings fighting for souls on the deathbed? Yes, Sandre, each mind lives amongst the company it has chosen. The same principle applies for those who live within the dense body or outside of it. It is important to realize, however, that most of the souls in this place are here due to the forces of attraction. They were incapable of perceiving the presence of the spirit benefactors who work among incarnates in endeavors of self-denial and benevolence, and due to their low vibrational level resulting from repeated wrongs, impenitent idleness, and willful crystallization in error, they found nothing but darkness all around them. Alone and confused, they went looking for discarnates with whom they had an affinity, and they naturally met in this immense hive, carrying the whole load of the destructive passions that characterize their journey. When such souls get here, however, they must endure the watchfulness of the powerful and hardened intelligences. Again, can't see the top line.
Who rule like dictators in these regions, where the bitter fruits of evil and indifference fill the storehouse of unprepared and malicious hearts.
Ah, I exclaimed under my breath, why does the Lord confer the attributes of judges on such despotic spirits? Why is justice in this strange city in the hands of diabolical leaders? Gubbio gave me a meaningful look and added, Who would dare appoint an angel of love to perform the role of tormentor? Also, just like in the corporal realm, every position after death is occupied by those who want it or look for it. I looked around and was overcome with compassion. In that community of victims herded together like rare animals for a feast, humility and affliction held sway. But among the sentinels, the poison of irony was overflowing. Swear words were disrespectfully shouted at random. One irreverent crowd was in front of a large unmanned platform and right under the side galleries packed with onlookers. After a few...
Thanks. When you see the red, you don't see the red there? Marked, the words marked in red?
The yellow.
No,
Yellow?
I don't. Oh, in yellow.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's when to stop. Anyway, I'll tell you. Okay, so here, the first thing that is interesting that Andre says, thankfully, that they didn't split them. Well, why didn't they split them? Because three of them vibrate the same type of energy, right? In a sense, as they will call later in the chapter, neutral energy. They are not suffering spirits, but they are hiding their degree of evolution, so they cannot be discovered by these guards. So it makes sense to me that they will be put together because they vibrate more or less the same energy. And Andre Luiz asks, the question here: are there spirits, satanic spirits, like in religious paintings, fighting for souls on their deathbed? When I read that, I was remembering the movie Ghost, when the bad guy dies and he's immediately taken away by those dark spirits, those dark shadows that take him somewhere, right? It's exactly what Andre Luiz is saying here. Gubbio says, each mind lives amongst the company it has chosen. The same principle applies for those who live within the dense body or outside of it. We are going to connect with the ones that our vibrations takes us. So when you are discarnating, you suddenly do not become a saint. You continue to vibrate at the same level. There are spirits that are going to get to you if you are vibrating at the same level as they are. Again, forces of attraction. The spirit's benefactor, it's important again, they were incapable of perceiving the presence of the spirit benefactors, which we always like to stress. There are always spirit benefactors available to us. But we need to connect to them. So these spirits that are there, as they say, as Gubbio says here, alone and confused, they look for discarnates whom they have an affinity. And of course, they end up in a place like this because of their mental vibrations. Again, they are taken to this place because that's where they, I won't say want to go, because nobody wants to go to this place, but unconsciously, that's where they want to go, because that's how they are vibrating. But of course, when they get there, as Gubbio says, there are powerful and hardened intelligences that rule like dictators and judge and dominate those spirits. So Andre Luiz asks the obvious question, right? Why does God allows? Don't we love to ask this question? Why does God allows? And we are going to keep repeating here. God doesn't allow anything. God creates the divine justice, and the divine justice is perfect. So to deal with these difficult spirits, you need spirits that are hardened, because that's the spirits that they are going to fear listened to, and that will eventually guide them to the changes they need to make in themselves to get out of this place. Because if you put like Gubbio says here, if you put an angel of love to take care of these spirits, what's going to happen? They're not going to listen to them. They're going to ignore. They're not affected by the care and the love. And, you know, we see this every week on our mediumship meetings, right? We try to talk to the spirits, and we try to reason to guide them with care and with love. And, you know, it's very difficult. They don't want to listen. So, and we deal with spirits that are not at this level. We deal with spirits that are suffering spirits, that are struggling, evil spirits sometimes, but they, you know, it's very hard for them to change, and they are not going to change with love. They are going to change with suffering. There is the only way they are going to change. So the natural law will give them the opportunity of redemption through suffering. So, like I underline here, every position after death is occupied by those who want it and look for it. Of course, Andre Luiz looks around, he's feeling compassion, because it's really the description here, rare animals herded together for a feast. It's a hard description, but that's what he's looking at. And of course, the guards, the irony is prevalent. That's what they do, right? They behave ironically, and you see that also here on Earth, right? So, comments, questions here? No?
No.
Okay. So let's see the judgment.
After a few unpleasant and oppressive minutes, a loud voice was heard. The judges, make way for the priests of justice. Curious, I tried to look outside. I saw officials dressed exactly like lictors of ancient Rome, carrying the symbolic axe on their shoulders and flanked by servants holding big torches to light the way. They entered the courtroom in rhythmic steps, and after them came 7 oddly dressed judges sitting on 7 sedan chairs carried by various dignitaries. What kind of religious ceremony was this? Those chairs were identical to the sedia gestatoria used in papal ceremonies.
The lictors entered the court, put their symbolic instruments aside, and stood in front of the large platform over which an alarming torch blazed.
The judges descended pompously from their thrones and took their seats in a kind of alcove, inspiring silence and fear, because the mindless throng suddenly grew quiet. A number of drums rolled, as if they were at a military parade, and semi-wild music accompanied their rhythm, grating on our nerves. When the noise ended, one of the judges stood up and addressed the crowd somewhat in these terms: neither tears nor lamentations, neither condemnation nor gratuitous acquittal. This court neither punishes nor rewards. Death is the road to justice. Any recourse to compassion is useless among criminals. We do not mete out suffering, but we are stewards of the government of the world. Our job is to divide up moral delinquents so that the punishment wrought by their own wills may be duly applied at the right place and time. Those who open their mouths to vilify and hurt must be ready to receive the dreadful energies they unleash through their poisonous words. Those who relish slander will have to endure the unfortunate beings to whom they lent their ears. Those who misuse their eyesight on hatred and disorder will discover new energies to contemplate the results of the imbalance they willingly took part in.
Those who use their hands to sow malice, dissension, envy, jealousy, and deliberate trouble must be prepared to reap thorns.
Those who focus their senses on abusing their sacred faculties will feel maddening needs from now on, because debasing passions harbored by the soul in the physical body will explode here. For a long time, the floodgate has kept microbes and monsters away from the peaceful course of the waters. Even so, a time comes when the storm or decadence overpowers the stone dam and set free the repellent forms spread and grow all along the current. Followers of vice and crime and tremble. You have condemned yourselves. You have kept your minds prisoner to the lowest forces of life, like the amphibians, which over the course of the centuries have grown accustomed to being stuck in the slime of the swamp.
Okay, thanks, Philip. Scary, right? So first thing here, remember that I mentioned that Gregorio was a former pope, right? Gregorio IX. So everything looks like ancient Rome. Why does everything looks like ancient Rome? Because that's the mind of the leader. That's Gregorio's position, and that's what he knows, and he was used in his physical life to dominate those in these places, in chairs, and in the chairs that they said were identical to the sedia gestatoria. Sedia gestatoria is the portable throne on which the Pope used to be carried in certain solemn occasions, okay? The carrying the symbolic axe, the fasces, as they say here. What is this? The word fasces means bundle and refers to the fact that it is a bundle of rods which surrounded an axe in the middle. If you remember, you have seen pictures of that. So this all looks like they are in the ancient Vatican, right? In ancient Rome, where the Pope is the higher figure that dominates religiously and politically all those around him. So that's the impression that that this procession of judges gives to Andre Luiz, and it makes sense, understanding where the Gregorio came from. So it's interesting here when the judge is addressing the crowd. It's very interesting that he tries to point here that everything that is done there is 100% just. There is no injustice. It is always everything is a consequence of their actions of the individuals. The blame is 100% on each individual and their behaviors, that they are not going to be punishing anyone unjustly, that they are the government of the world. And Andre Luiz later is going to ask why they consider themselves government of the world. And I'm not going to say anything right now. I'll allow Gubbio to explain to us later. So these rulers, they feel that they are in the right of judging this, what they call criminals, because these criminals, they condemn themselves to be in those places. And again, he's not completely wrong, right? They ended up there because of their own actions, their own minds. It's not that they were dragged there by some injustice. they are in a place where they made themselves be, and that's the consequences. Everything in the natural law is cause and consequences. These are the consequences of what they did to themselves. Again, we're going to keep asking, where is the mercy of the Lord? Where are the protecting spirits trying to protect them, try to allow them to get out of those places? And we are going to repeat and insist, they are always there. So among those remember we mentioned last month that I don't remember if it was 90 or 95% of the spirits are this type of spirits. So we have 5 to 10% of spirits that are there exclusively to rescue those that are ready to be rescued. But for these spirits to be ready to be rescued, the only way for them is through suffering. They have to go to the deep abyss to recognize that they need external help and assistance, because they get to the bottom of their suffering, and that's when they open themselves to assistance. Until then, they will be living in this dark domination of inferior spirits. And let's again open parenthesis here. We are not going to end in a place like this, right? These are spirits, and you see some of them that have committed crimes in their lives, that have abused of their power, of their positions to cause harm to others. So again, let us be very clear that we are dealing here with the very deep lower zones, not a place that will, even if we don't go to a place like Nosso Lar, which in my opinion, we are all going to end up, we are never going to be in a place like this according to how we are conducting our lives at present. Of course, we haven't finished our lives. We still have more things to do, but it's also always important to remember that what counts is the intention. What counts is our willingness to evolve physically and morally and intellectually. That will prevent us of ending up in a place like this. Okay. So he says here, those who focus their senses on abusing their sacred faculties will feel maddening needs from now on, because the base passions harbored by the soul in the physical body will explode here. What does he mean that? When you are free of your physical body, that serves as a distraction because of the daily needs. You have to eat, you have to sleep, you have to live your life. Without those needs, the passions, the debasing passions explode, in the sense that it becomes all you think about. So if you are, let's say you are an alcoholic and you died because of liver cirrhosis, and you never dealt with it, you wake up on the other side, and the need for alcohol is everything that you can think of. The passion explodes there. So you are going to try to connect with those that are drinking here in the physical world to be able to share their intake of alcohol. But again, he keeps telling them, you have condemned yourselves. It's not us, it's you. You have kept your minds prisoner for the lowest forces of life. So what they are trying to reinforce, all these spirits are already feeling guilty. They end up feeling guilty. They end up there feeling maybe some sort of regret, but completely feeling guilty of their actions. And these spirits are reinforcing their guilty feelings, so to to keep them there in that place and easier to be dominated. Sorry, it's a little bit heavy, but it's important for us to understand the reality of these dark places in the spiritual world that are this what we can describe, as we mentioned before, as hell. Okay. Comments, questions here?
Yeah, I think it's not too far from as much as we know, of course, in our ignorance as well, of what the real justice is, right? Of course, minus the aspect of being an exterior judge. In reality, the judge is ourselves. The same way that we condemn ourselves to those places, we ourselves can get ourselves out of those places. And the perception of the perpetual punishment is absurd also. But taking off those two things, it's not so far from the reality of divine justice, much as we know, of course, in our ignorance.
Yeah, definitely. Again, our human justice is a copy of the justice we have there, right? So I'm sure that those that formulated the justice here in humanity, starting with the Romans, right? The Greeks and the Romans, they brought notions of justice from the spiritual world, right? From their time in the spiritual world. So, and then you keep updating it, but improving it in a sense. The concept of rehabilitation, which is a very difficult concept yet today to apply, because we know that most prisons do not really rehabilitate, unfortunately. The theoretical role will be rehabilitation, but we still it's still not what most prisons in the world do today. So it's hard, but that's the reality again. Anyone else?
And you already mentioned, but I think it's important to repeat that if God is omnipresent, God is also present in those places, and God's benevolence and God's compassion is also present in those places, which is very hard for us to understand, and that requires a little bit of a blind faith.
Yeah, but when you rationalize in the sense that talking about those here in the physical world, right? One thing that they say in prisons, right? Nobody's guilty, right? If you talk to prisoners, nobody's guilty of anything. They will all say that they're innocent in prisons, right? Until you recognize your mistakes and act on it, you are going to have to keep facing the consequences, right? So God's justice is allowing our free will to dictate where it takes ourselves, right? It's our own choices in the end. It's hard as it is for us to understand how someone has the free will to end up in a place like this. In the end, it is according to the consequences of our own actions, and our actions are dictated by our free will. And again, we're not talking about spirits here that commit mistakes for lack of knowledge, lack of understanding. For when you make mistakes because you don't know better, there are consequences, but it's the consequence will never be to end up in a place like this. This is important also to remember, right? These are spirits that committed crimes and they knew exactly what they are doing, right? It's not spirits that are making mistakes, committing crimes for lack of better understanding of who they are or where they are. These spirits are taken to different places. Okay. Okay, let's go on, Philip.
The speaker paused, and I examined his audience. Everyone's eyes were wide open with fear. The judge did not show a trace of mercy. He was only interested in creating a negative atmosphere instead of any sort of moral edification, establishing downright fear in his listeners. As the pause continued, I shot a look of silent questioning at our guide, who replied in a whisper. The judge is fully aware of the magnetic laws of the lower spheres and is trying to destructively hypnotize his victims, despite using the blunt truth, as we've seen. It does no good to complain about the way this colony is run, the booming voice continued, because none can escape the consequences of their own deeds, just as the fruit cannot run from the properties of the tree that produced it.
All right, just a sec. May all who disrespect our decisions be cursed by the world government, for our decisions are based on each person's own mental files.
Intuitively perceiving his audience's mental complaints, he roared terrifyingly. Who accuses us of being cruel? Is not a prison warden a benefactor of the human collective spirit? And who are you, if not just human rubbish? Did you not come here led by the idols you worship? At that remark, many were overcome with convulsive weeping. Tormented cries begging for mercy were heard. Several fell to their knees. Overwhelming grief had taken over. Gubbio placed his right hand on his chest as if holding his heart. For my part, as I watched that large group of rebellious, humiliated, prideful, and defeated spirits bitterly regretting wasted opportunities, I recalled my own former ways of illusion and, why not admit it, I too kneeled in repentance, silently begging for mercy. Enraged, the judge bellowed angrily, forgiveness? Did you ever sincerely forgive your companions in life? Show me just one righteous judge that offers mercy with impunity. And using his hands to focus all his magnetic power on a poor woman who was staring at him in dismay, he commanded her in a somber voice, come here, come here. Looking hypnotized, the poor wretch obeyed the order, emerged from the crowd, and placed herself under the forceful rays of his attention. Confess, confess, ordered the ruthless judge, aware of the fragile and passive being he was addressing.
The poor woman smote her breast as if reciting the Confiteor and cried out in sorrow. Forgive me,
oh my God. As if under the power of some mysterious drug that made her expose her innermost self to all of us, she spoke in a loud, halting voice. I killed 4 innocent little children, and I hired the murderer of my unbearable husband. But my crime is a live, living monster. It persecuted me while I was in the physical body. I tried to run from it by every means possible, but it was useless. And the more I tried to drown my wretchedness in drinking for pleasure, the more I wallowed in the mire of my own self. Suddenly, appearing to experience the interference of loathsome memories, she clamored, I want wine, wine, pleasure. In a forceful demonstration of power, the judge stated triumphantly, How can prayers and tears liberate such a human beast? Then, fixing the radiation from his fearsome look on her, he proclaimed peremptorily, she was condemned herself. She has condemned herself. She is nothing but a she-wolf, a wolf, a wolf. As he repeated these words, as if trying to persuade her to feel like an animal, I saw the deeply impressionable woman's face begin to change. Her mouth twisted, the neck curved spontaneously forward, and her eyes changed in its sockets. Her face took on a wolf-like look. In that display of power, I was obviously witnessing the effect of hypnotism on her perispiritual body. Gubbio explained in a whisper.
Remorse is, of course, a blessing that leads us to make amends, but it is also a bridge through which one's creditor demands payment.
Hardness congeals our sensibility for a certain amount of time, and yet a time always comes when remorse opens our mental life to the jolts of our own emissions coming back to us. In a barely audible voice, he added, we are witnessing the genesis of the phenomena of lycanthropy, which is still impenetrable to the research of incarnate doctors. Do you remember
Nebuchadnezzar?
Oh boy. The powerful king referred to in the Bible? The Holy Book tells us that for 7 years, he lived as if he were an animal. Hypnotism is as old as the world itself and has been used by good and bad individuals alike. It is based primarily on the pliable elements of the perispirit. Noticing that the unfortunate woman still had the strange facial features, I asked, will that poor sister keep such a degrading appearance from now on? After a long pause, the instructor replied sadly, she would not have to endure such humiliation if she didn't deserve it. Moreover, even though she has conformed to the forceful energies of the cruel judge, into whose hands she has fallen, she can still make an inner effort to renew her mental life for the supreme good and attune herself to the influence of benefactors who are never scarce on the redemptive path. In cases like this, Andre, everything is a matter of attunement. Our life will develop where we put our thoughts.
Okay, so there is so much here.
Yep.
So let's try to go over and explains what's going on here. So first, what we said before, the judge was only interested in creating a negative atmosphere instead of any sort of moral edification, establishing downright fear in his listeners, because he wanted them to feel guilty and to stay that way, to feel like they are in hell and there is no way out. So the judge knows how to hypnotize his victims. And he continues, right? There's no way to escape here. Then he calls this woman. Everybody is before that. It's interesting that a lot of people start crying, start kneeling, asking for forgiveness, and he continues. And even Andre Luiz, recalling his own past, kneeled in repentance, begging for mercy. So the words of the judge affected even Andre Luiz, right? Of course, Gubbio was praying in silence for those victims, for those poor spirits, trying to help them. But what the judge is saying here is how did you ever forgive anyone in your life? Why, why you think you deserve forgiveness now? There is no judge that offers mercy with impunity. And again, he's not wrong in the sense that what we do here, right? We condemn people that have committed crimes. We don't offer impunity if they are guilty of committing the crimes. And then he calls this woman, and with his power over her, he forces her to confess that she killed 4 innocent little children. We don't know if it's through abortion or through murder, but in any way, she killed children. And then he hired someone to kill her husband. Of course, guilty conscience took over her, and she tried to overcome guilty with drinking. And we don't know the details of how she discarnate, but of course, the drinking problem was still there, because when she remembered that, she started asking for more wine and more pleasure, which was the way that she hidden her guilty while she was living. And then the judge tells everybody that she has condemned herself, that nobody's condemning her, she has condemned herself, and starts to call her a wolf. And the transformation begins through, like Andre Luiz says here, through the effect of hypnotism on her perispiritual body. He started accusing her as a wolf, and we see the phenomenon called lycanthropy, which is the transformation of the physical body to an animal form because of how you are feeling, right? Through the hypnotism and the impression made of on her mind, she transforms herself, her perispirit, into a wolf. Again, we know the perispirit is very malleable and it's subject to change according to our thoughts. Gubbio mentions the famous case of Nebuchadnezzar, the king in the Bible, that according to the Bible, he lived for 7 years as an animal. Really, I went to look for it. It talks about his life as an animal, living exactly like an animal, but it's a very colorful description of the Bible. But again, we see that it's possible, right? That it happens. And then Andre Luiz, of course, asks how long she's going to keep that appearance. And Gubbio, as long as her mental life doesn't change, until she attunes herself to the influence of the benefactors who are always available for redemptive path, she's going to continue. As Gubbio says, everything is a matter of attunement. Our life will develop where we put our thoughts. I'm going to ask Elmo to give some thoughts here because it's a lot of information here, and I just covered a little bit of everything we read here.
Yeah, I think we could spend a whole hour on this passage. It's so
I
rich,
know.
and it's so easy to miss so much important thing.
Yeah.
I think we'd start with the definition of hypnotism. It's very important to understand that hypnotism is the power of suggestion. So not everyone is a good subject to hypnotism. That our perispirit is indeed very malleable to the power of our own minds, but our own minds can be receptive to suggestions and act on it. That's what hypnotism is. So when this priest, and here you see the sequence of events, by doing that spectrography, so to say, being able to select and look the aura or the quality of vibration of each one individuals, they already knew who's going to be a good subject to be hypnotized and act on it. In this case, lycanthropy. They already knew who could be used as an example. They picked that woman not by chance. They knew exactly that she is a good subject to be hypnotized and act on lycanthropy like that. So they selected her particularly because they know of it. So the most important here is don't think that the priest caused the lycanthropy. The priest used the suggestion that was taken by that mind and was taken by that mind because of the guilty that's in there, and that allows the lycanthropy to take place. So again, it's pretty much self-imposed. The acceptance or the receptivity of the suggestion, hypnotism, is directly associated with one's guilty, with one's weak of the spirit, or the poorest of the spirit, so to say, because it's so filled with guilt and remorse. I think that's very important to leave it clear. Oh my goodness, what else can I say here? So much stuff. It's hard. The alcoholism, it persists in her mind as on a way that she used to try to hide herself from herself, to try to escape from the guilt, to try to hide the conflict of all that has just done with the divine justice that resides in our conscience. I think that disharmony, that lack of equilibrium, is what caused most of the disturbances on us. It's our conscience trying to get us to the right side, try to forcing us to make the corrections, and we just seek to stick on the wrong side of things. That conflict is what generates so much guilt that makes us so weak to be receptive to those kinds of minds. It is amazing how really intellectually speaking, those leaders are capable, how smart they really are. One thing that I was thinking here is in our mediumship meetings, very often we will speak with the spirit who says, "You do not understand. You can't see me. Look at me. I am a monster. I am a monster." How many times have you heard this? To try to get those spirits to understand that that's not their real selves, it's so extremely difficult. They are now so convinced that they are that thing, and that they are different from us. They are not humans anymore. I think it's the hardest thing that, at least personally speaking, when we have the hard spirits that we see in our meetings, is those kind of spirits. They are absolutely convinced that they do not belong to the human class anymore. They are a monster now, because that's how they see themselves.
Yeah, and the way back is a difficult and painful way. There's no way of escaping that. It's through suffering.
Yep.
Luis, you have any comment?
Actually, two questions. First has to do with hypnotism that Elmo just addressed, in my opinion, partially. I wonder, although I wonder if there's a difference of hypnotism in our incarnated world and hypnotism as shown in this book, I mean, although both are based on suggestion, I think the processes are very different. My personal opinion, I'd like to know yours. And also, from reading the text, it seems to me that the woman did not change totally, but just her face, her jaw and her eyes. So she didn't turn into her perispirit, obviously, didn't turn into a full wolf-like, but just her face changed. Do you have the same impression that I do?
The second question, yes. My impression was just her face, but again, the face becomes a wolf, and I think that eventually, if she continues like that, the rest is going to change, like also, right? In terms of hypnotism, I don't really know a lot about hypnotism here on the physical world. I know it's a suggestion of the mind, but I tend to think that it's probably similar, with the difference that the perispirit is much more malleable and more so. But in the end, the hypnotism is dealing with the mind of the spirit, right? And the spirit, the physical body or spiritual body are just the instruments where the spirit acts. And I can't think that it's much different, because when you think about hypnotism here, right? You go to a hypnotism session. I never been to one, but I read about it. Sometimes the subject is not hypnotized and someone in the audience is hypnotized. So that clearly shows that it's an action of influencing the mind, changing the mind. And I think that in the spiritual world it will be a little easier, because they have the better ability of reading the mind. So here in the physical world, a hypnotist doesn't completely knows if he or she will be able to hypnotize the person, because only after it starts they will be able to see. There, I think they have more of a certainty that they can hypnotize, because they have a better access to the minds of the spirits. But I'd like to hear Elmo here on this also.
I think the process is quite similar. It cannot be identical, because here we have to deal with all the barriers that is this physical body, but the process or the way it works is still the power of suggestion, and that's what makes not everyone be a good candidate. As you said, the subject may not be able to be hypnotized, but somewhere and someone else witnessing, watching the event, becomes receptive to the suggestion and becomes hypnotized. Here we have a hypnotist being successful, like for smoking sensations, for some kind of chronic pain. Naturally, the subject is receptive, because it does truly really wants to stop smoking. And that's very important, that the person goes over there because the person really, really wants, or goes over there because it's being pushed by the family or by society. But in reality, deep inside, perhaps even at a subconscious level, this person sees cigarette smoke as a good thing, as the cigarette is my companion. I have this undiagnosed depression, and the only thing that gives me a little peace of mind is when I'm blowing some smoke and those kind of things. That person may not really be a subjective for the hypnotist, because truly, even if the subconscious level, this person doesn't really want to stop smoking. So I think the process is quite similar. Is the fundamentals is the same, the still power of suggestion, but of course I have this physical body is a great barrier for those energies to invade us and take place on us. That's perhaps easier in the spiritual plane.
One last question. I remember many instances being in mediumistic meetings where the spirit being helped appeared like a reptile or a wolf or whatever, and the orientator was able to change his appearance. Have you been present in similar circumstances?
Yeah, like I almost said, we have sometimes spirits that come and say that, I'm a monster, you don't see. And if I remember, we were able to make them regain their human-like appearance. I don't remember anything specific. I don't know if Elmo remembers.
I don't know if Luiz is being more specific of having seen mediums that are actually able to see and report that they actually see a transformation of the perispirit right there in the eyes of the seeing mediums, or what we hear from the spirits lead us to believe that the spirit was able to make that transformation.
In a number of those circumstances, I'm curious about this. So I remember several times where the orientator perceived the form and perceived the change. And in a few of those times, I later on asked the medium, and she confirmed, yes, he was all like with, like a dragon or like a crocodile or something. So the orientator perceived during the dialogue, purely through mediumistic abilities of his own, I would say. I've never seen that. I mean, I've been orientator a few times, but I've never seen anything. But that's what I experienced there. I was curious about.
Yeah, we had seen some cases in which, from the words of the spirit itself, it's pretty clear to us that that spirit was able to see him or herself again as a human being, as someone like us, and not a differentiated species kind of monster. And usually they go into tremendous amount of crying, and it's obvious from what they are saying that they were able to see themselves as a human spirit again. But I have never, I don't think we have, at least I have never asked to the mediums if they were able to confirm that.
Because, by the way, this was surprising to me. I mean, I've seen things like that so many times, not specifically related to lycanthropy. I remember one in particular where the orientator, I mean, like the second phrase, the guy asked to the spirit, "Why do you have this knife on your back?" I mean, he was seeing something. He was seeing the guy with a knife in his back. And actually, he was killed in his most recent incarnation by a guy who ambushed him and stuck a knife to his back. So it's not surprising to me for the orientator to see things. I have seen this many, many times. But the transformation I was curious about.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, let's go, Philip.
Our guide could not continue. Lamentations grew louder all around us. There was no end to the injections of dread and grief.
The judge ordered silence and scolded the wailers for their attitude.
Then he announced that the selective spirits would materialize shortly, and that those who were interested could ask of them any explanations they wanted. At the same time, he raised his hands reverently, and showing that he was in control of the strange gathering, he uttered a loud invocation indicating his status as a hierophant to be respected with great solemnity. When he was finished his speech, a large cloudy layer appeared over the platform, which had been empty until then. Little by little, before our astonished eyes, 3 spirits took perfect human form. The one with the most hierarchical authority held a small crystalline instrument in his hands. They were wearing robes of a curious, indefinable bright yellow substance and had dull reddish auras. The aureola was more prominently vivid around the head and was sending out disturbing radiations that looked like the glow from red-hot iron. His 2 acolytes took documents from a nearby coffer and followed him as he descended toward us in silence. The turbulent crowd was suddenly quiet. I did not know what secret organizations those spirits came from. However, I did notice that the head of the trio wore a deeply melancholic look on his face. He lifted the crystalline instrument in front of the first group, composed of 14 men and women of various types. He made some remarks that I could not follow, and then said something to his companions, who immediately wrote something down. But before he moved on, 2 members of the group begged for help. Justice, justice, begged the first. I am being punished for something I didn't do. I was a man of thought and learning among incarnates. Why do I have to put up with the company of the avaricious?
And looking at the selector in anguish, he added,
If you judge fairly, then release me from this labyrinth. He had finished when the second broke in. Venerable judge, whoever you are, I am not one of the avaricious. I have been thrown in with sordid and despicable beings. I spent my life surrounded by books, not money. Science fascinated me. Studies were my favorite task. So how can an intellectual be classified as a usurer? The leader of the selectors had a look of reserved pity on his calm face and explained firmly. You complain in vain because unpleasant vibrations of selfishness characterize every one of you. What did you do with the educational treasure you were given? Your vibrational tone shows sarcastic avarice. Those who accumulate degrees and books, theories, and scientific values without sharing them to the benefit of others are unfortunate brothers and sisters of those who hoard money and equities, titles and precious objects without helping anyone. The same plate serves both of them on the scale of life. For God's sake, one of those onlookers begged in tears, this is a house of justice in the name of the government of the world, the judge remarked calmly, and impassive, although visibly embittered, he moved on to the next group.
okay. So what do we have here? Complaints continue. And what we have is this so-called selector spirits who materialize in themselves in front of everyone. That surprises Andre Luiz. And what is that? Again, in the spiritual world, spirits can move from one way to another. Through materialization is possible in the spiritual world, and you don't need the moral evolution, you need intellectual knowledge. So these spirits are, of course, intellectually more evolved and morally not evolved. That's why they act on these places. So these spirits that come looking, these three spirits that come and are the ones examining the groups, the specific groups, are spirits that work together with Gregorio and that are brought from some other place around there, definitely not from a more evolved place, but a different place. So the materialization is possible. Again, mediumship here and there is neutral. The use we make of mediumship is what makes the difference. And that's why Elmo always repeat what comes from Erastus, right? In Spiritism, we practice mediumship with Jesus. But mediumship can be practiced and is being practiced here as a materialization by low order spirits that are using it to impress these already scared spirits. And then we have this very interesting case of this spirit complaining that he's in the wrong place, that he had never harmed anyone, that he dedicated his life to study and to books and not to money, that he all spent his life to studies. And it reminds me when I'm reading this, the motto of Spiritism, right? Without charity, there is no salvation. So he didn't have any charity, everything selfish. All his work for his own benefit, never thinking of anyone else. Sarcastic avarice. So the spirit's telling him, those who accumulate degrees and books, theories and scientific values without sharing them, without charity, are unfortunate brothers and sisters of those who hoard money and equities. We know titles and precious objects. We know that those are also guilty. But they bring a new class of spirits, those that are selfish in their pursuit of knowledge without sharing it with anyone else. Again, it doesn't go beyond that here. We have to imagine that there is something a little deeper with this spirit that brings him to this place. But the basics is the phrase, without charity, there is no salvation. Okay. Any comments here? Questions? Elmo?
No, I think you covered everything there, Ron. It's a very dense, difficult chapter to read.
Yeah. So we have 6 minutes. Let's finish it.
He began scrutinizing a group of 8 individuals. However, as he was communicating with his aides regarding his observations, a man with a cadaverous face shouted furiously, "What's going on in this weird place? I'm in the midst of a bunch of confessed slanderers, whereas I perform the role of a respectable man. I raised a large family. I never betrayed my social duties. I was respectable and
dignified. Despite retiring early, I fulfilled every duty that the world had given me."
With a touch of rage, he continued, "Who is accusing me? Who is accusing me?" The selector explained serenely, "Your condemnation comes from you yourself. You slandered your own body, creating obstacles and illnesses for it that existed only in your imagination, which was interested in avoiding beneficial and redemptive work. You assigned deplorable deficiencies and illnesses to healthy organisms just so you could retire early. You succeeded. You used your friends, you subordinated criminal consciences, and you received paid rest for 40 years during which you did nothing but sleep and make useless conversation. Now it is reasonable that your vital circle is attuned to all those who have become immersed in the bog of slander." The wretch had no will to argue. In tears, he yielded to the argument and went back to his place. Upon reaching the 3rd group, composed of several women, he had barely applied the odd instrument to their vibrational field when he was approached by a dreadfully disfigured woman who complained to his face. Why such humiliation? She asked in copious tears. I had a home that required a lot of work, and I came here surrounded by special considerations because my social status. So why am I stuck here with these shameful women? I am of nobility. Who are the officials who are forcing me to live with these whores? A fit of tears choked her voice. With a composure that bordered on iciness, the judge stated flatly, this is a realm where mistakes rarely happen. Ask your own conscience. Were you really the overseer of a respectable home, as you say?
Your vibrational level shows that your sanctified female energies were abused.
Your mental files contain emotion. Sorry? What is that word?
Mental files contain emotional irregularities that will take a long time for you to redeem.
It doesn't look like your home was your favorite place. The woman yelled, gestured, and complained, but the selector carried on. When he reached us, he applied the instrument, which displayed tiny mirrors, and spoke to his assistants defining our status, neutral entities. He fixed his piercing gaze on us as if silently guessing our hidden intentions and moved on. Gubbio explained, we're not being accused of anything. We will be able to do what we came to do. What sort of instrument was that? Asked Eloy, anticipating my curiosity. It's a mental wave receiver. A personalized selection would take too long. The authorities who rule this region favor group assessment, which is possible due to the colors, vibrations of the vital circle that surrounds each of us. Why did he say we were neutral? I asked. The apparatus is not capable of determining the status of minds from our sphere. It is used for identifying imbalanced perispirits and does not reach the higher zone. But why does he speak in the name of the government of the world? The instructor made an expressive gesture and added.
Andre, don't forget that this is a plane of somewhat dense matter, not one of glorious sanctity.
Don't forget the word evolution, and remember that the worst crimes of earthly civilizations have been committed in the name of the divinity. While in the physical body, how many times did we see cruel sentences issued by ignorant minds in God's name? After some time, the ceremony ended with the same pompousness in which it began. And under the watchful eye of the sentinels, we returned to our starting point with unexpected meditations and profound thoughts.
Okay, so here, the first one that he approaches is it's a man that says that he did his duty, raised his family, and the judge tells him, well, you spend 40 years being paid to do nothing but sleep and make useless conversation. So of course we don't have more details, but we can imagine someone that spends 40 years in useless conversation have influenced some minds and made some minds change for not the better. So he's there because of the consequences of his lack of action or action in this useless time that he spent not trying to improve himself or others around him. He recognizes. And then there this woman that pretends that she's of a nobility and accuses them why putting herself in the middle of those inferior beings, and the judge is very direct, saying that you don't, your energies, your female energies were abused. We can make our own conclusions where and what she was doing and how she was living, right? And then he reaches Andre Luiz and Eloy and Gubbio, and he cannot read them, of course, because they don't have these guilty consciences. They don't have this inferior energies. So what he sees is nothing, neutral entities. Neutral entities means he cannot read them, so he cannot conclude what they are. Again, in the middle of that large number of spirits, he really doesn't care what they are doing there. He couldn't read them, he moves on. These are not interested in those, they're not guilty of anything, they're neutral. I don't know what they're doing there. He says here, this is a realm where mistakes rarely happen, which means they happen. And this is, let's say, a mistake. He didn't recognize those spirits that were there for a different type of work, and he passed them by and didn't make any decision for what they had to do. And then what I said, why he speak in the name of the government of the world, that Andre Luiz asked, and the answer is very clear, right? The worst crimes in earthly civilizations have been committed in the name of the divinity. How many times did we see cruel sentences issued by ignorant minds in God's names? We see that in human history, right? Abuses in the name of God, abuses in the name of so-called justice are being done every day, continues to be done. So for these spirits to use the term government of the world, it's not really something very different from what we see here in governments and religious organizations that abuse their power in the name of their own beliefs, in a sense. Okay. Okay. Very intense chapter, very heavy, but it gives us an idea of in what place they find themselves, Eloy, Andre Luiz, and Gubbio. Okay. Any final comments, questions here?
Yeah, I think the ending is very important for us. If you take Andre Luiz as an example, he spent 7 or 8, whatever number of years in the spiritual world. I think there's a controversy for 7 or 8 in the lower zone, not by chance, because he had something in his energies that condemned him to go that place. He condemned himself to that place, of course. But now, after all those years of purification, they cannot find anything on him anymore. Now he is neutral. That's a very good sign of how this divine justice really works. How can we are really in the process of purification, of freeing ourselves from those negative energies? How can we really transforming vices into virtues? That Andre Luiz, from that upon death, had spent all this time in the lower zones for a good reason, of course. Now they cannot even identify anything left behind of that time Andre Luiz anymore. That's why he's read as neutral. I think is a great example of hope for all of us, because you read this chapter and think, oh boy, I'm in serious trouble. But you see Andre Luiz here, it's really up to us, and this process of purification is a reality.
Yeah, and then also learning to deal with the guilty, right? Because guilty doesn't take us anywhere if we don't act on it. If we don't repair, actively trying to repair, because guilty can be a good starting point. But if we just allow ourselves to be immersed in guilty without doing anything with it, it can be very harmful, as we see here, right?
Yep.
Okay, so thank you all. Next month we will do chapter 6, observations and new discoveries. Before we finish here, just a couple of announcements. Those that couldn't watch Luiz' lecture yesterday on Spiritism, Science and Philosophy, go to our website, to our YouTube page, SGNY, and take a look at it. Very, very interesting, worth looking. He also agreed to give us a couple of lectures. As you all know, we finished On the Way to the Light. So before we start a new book, we are going to have a series of lectures with him and with Jussara to finish the year. So Luiz is going to be doing Intelligence and Instinct, a lecture divided instinct and intelligence, the other way around. A lecture divided in 2 parts in 2 months, in October and November. So the 3rd Sunday of October, 3rd Sunday of November, which is October 16 and November 20th, he's going to be covering that. And in December, the 3rd Sunday of December, Jussara will be giving us our year-end lecture like she always does every year. Okay, and next Sunday, which is the 2nd Sunday of the month, we will be studying the Gospel according to Spiritism, as usual. Okay, Carol, can you do our final prayer?
Sure. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, John, Elmo, Luis. Infinite Creator and Supreme Intelligence, we are grateful today to be together for our study of the book Liberation, Chapter 5, A Selective Procedure. We are grateful to our spiritual benefactors, the good spirits, the helpers, the healers, the mentors who are with us, guiding us to receive the benefits of these studies. We are grateful for what we have received, the comments, the commentary, the exchange, and may we put this deeper into our resources and share with others as they may be receptive. We are grateful for these studies, and we remind ourselves to try to balance our intellectual and our moral sides and reduce guilt whenever possible. We give thanks to the spiritual benefactors who are with us, guiding us, helping us, inspiring us to do better and better each day, to keep our thoughts elevated, our hearts open, and our focus on charity, which is love in action. May we remind ourselves, when in doubt, we can use the golden rule, do unto others as we would have them do unto us. May we continue with our prayers, with our studies and mindfulness throughout the week. And we humbly ask for our safety and protection and guidance as we go forth and return to family, friends, loved ones, and co-workers. We pray for those who are in need of healing, who are in need of consoling, who are in need of comfort, those in the physical world as well as those who are in the spiritual world. We are grateful for what we have received today, and we ask humbly to receive the love, light, and peace of Christ within us. As we close, we remind ourselves to be beacons of light. Go forth now in peace, so be it.